Welcome to Financial Planning Explained. I'm your host, Mike Menninger, certified financial planner, owner and founder of Menninger and Associates Financial Planning. I am here with my co-host today, Kyle Ryan, also a certified financial planner on staff. But more importantly, I am delighted to have as my guest Dr. Maggie Baker. Dr. Maggie, thank you for joining me again.
Well, I'm delighted to be here with you guys.
That's terrific. So we're on our third episode because the first two we just couldn't get enough in to be able to conclude everything. And this is just, behavioral finance is a very interesting topic and also a very important topic when it comes to financial planning for us, because we got to understand the emotion, because emotion is a very, very important component of financial planning. And therefore for us, understanding the emotions that go behind it to be able to help our clients, much like you do, but in a little bit of a different way. But I am going to want to talk to you a little bit later more about precisely what you do with your clients and digging down deep, et cetera, et cetera. But I know, Kyle, you had a handful of things that we didn't get to because I wouldn't shut up.
Put it lightly. No, I'm just kidding. So Dr. Maggie, in the beginning, in the very first episode we did, you were talking about your background, your introduction to learning about finance. You said that one of the, if I can call it, mistakes you made early on was innate greed as it came to investing. You mentioned that your broker was buying aggressive stocks. So my question would be, how does an unsavvy or uneducated investor know when they're being greedy? And what can they do more or less to prevent that if they're unknowledgeable of it?
Well, I'll give you an example of my own reaction, and then we can grow from there. And that is when somebody offered me, given my background with money, my family's background with money, and how, I grew up with much less than my parents grew up with. I was always vulnerable to being insecure about money. So when somebody tells me, boy, you could make a real killing on this stock, I'm panting. This really sounds good. It's like, let's go. And that combined with the kind of unconscious, but probably a very familiar belief to some people is, I'm going to be special. I'm going to find that stock that's, it's running like NVIDIA is now. And it's going to come to me because of my, quote, specialness. And again, that can be unconscious, but I think everybody has that feeling that that's what they really like. And of course, if you're fueling your own mind with ideas like that, but you're not aware of those ideas that you're feeding your mind with, you're very, very vulnerable to greed. And you're very vulnerable to taking excitement to a level that it shouldn't be taken to. Because your financial advisor or planner might be very excited about the ideas that they have for you, but you might interpret that as, okay, let's just go for broke. And they don't know that unless they, kind of listen very carefully and make sure that that's not where this is.
You need to understand it. Yeah, need to fully understand it. Did you watch the movie Wall Street?
Yes.
Gordon Gekko. What did Gordon Gekko say? Greed is good.
Yes. Yes. Well,
if controlled. And I jokingly bring that up because did you see Wall Street?
I don't think so.
You have got to see it. You've got to see it. Oh, it's a great movie.
Can you essentially take that and say that confidence can very easily blur into overconfidence?
Yes.
Can easily blur into that?
Yes.
And you can apply that to a lot of different things other than finances.
It's the whole concept of casinos and intermittent reinforcement. Yeah. Those casinos have the algorithm down for intermittent reinforcement, meaning that if you gamble on those, one-armed bandits things, they program it so just as you're losing tons of quarters or whatever, you get a huge win. And that huge win just stokes, oh gosh, if I keep going with this, I'm going to get another big win. And I know I can just walk out of here with that win.
Yeah, right.
Well, how many people ever walk out of there with that win?
That's a very good point. Yep.
And that, I think that same principle applies. You know, you have one stock that does great, or you hear of a stock that has done great, and you figure it's going to keep doing great. Not necessarily, but there's enough sense that maybe, you know, I'm going to hit it big, that keeps you going and keeps you kind of, how should I say, being over expansive with your expectations.
And that's a really good transition into when you have any period of wins or gains, whatever it is, losses or liabilities, does that impact you and your risk tolerance moving forward? Like, say your first experience with the market, when you started really focusing on it, was a down market. I have people, when the market's going up, and it's been going up for a year, maybe 2 years, their risk tolerance, I can afford risk. I can stomach that downside because I haven't seen that downside in a while. Whereas when the market's going down, I will not buy into it. I will not lose money.
Right,
and that's so
that's
common.
the naive investor's attitude. And that's the most beautiful example of against the efficient market theory.
Oh, there you go.
In the sense that everybody is going to do logically what's best for them.
You know, it's funny, you said the casino, and you used an example of something that I wrote a paper about a couple years ago. When do you sell the stock? And I remember opening with almost verbatim, buying stock is one of the easiest things in the world to do. Selling the stock is one of the hardest things in the world to do. Because if it's up, I don't want to sell it. It's doing great. I want it to do better. Greed. But if it's losing, I don't want to sell it. It's losing. I want to get my money back. There's emotion getting in the way. But on the flip side, gentleman, I think his name is Bill O'Neill, founded the Investors Business Day.
Yeah.
And Wall Street, every year, for years, had a competition. They give you 100,000 fake dollars, and at the end of the year, who has the most money? He won 3 years in a row.
Wow.
And one of the philosophies he had is that whenever he bought a stock, he immediately had a sell order at 7% below the price. So he never took it in the shorts on any one investment.
Well, that's we used him as a guide in our investment club.
Really?
Yeah.
That's pretty
Bill
funny.
O'Neill.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But
Oh my
greed,
gosh.
so
Oh, I know what I was going to say. When you get that frothy feeling, that would be the name, you know, where it's going to go up forever.
right,
That's kind of froth.
right,
That's when I would help people say, you know, this is the time to sell.
right.
You've got to sell. And now how can you turn that, you know, if you're just listening, you can say something like, you know, what I'm hearing you say is you're getting really excited. You're getting excited about going to Starbucks and having as much sugar as you can possibly stuff into a coffee. And that is a warning signal to me. Is that a warning signal to you? You know, something like that.
It's amazing you mentioned that because in the last 3 years, I think every single time the market's either peaked or hit its bottom, I had a client reach out to me within that week saying, hey, at the top, we should buy more. Or at the bottom, I think it's a good time to get out.
Yeah.
And it's
We have them. We call him his name gauge. When he's ready to pull out, we know the market's at the bottom.
Yep.
And when he's ready to go buy more, the market's at the top.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
And you mentioned there was a survey about how advisors, you can get anywhere from 1-2% better rate of return over the long haul. There's a lot of black and white stuff that we do, you know, harvesting losses at the right time, tax treatment, allocation. At the end of the day, I think the most important thing an advisor does is just simply be the accountability buffer.
And one thing that is really important for advisors to do is when things go down, call. Because a lot of advisors duck.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
That's-
Mike
wanna-
has a email he sends out weekly. It's the weekly market recap. Yeah, I mean, you tell.
I'll give you. Sorry, right
Go
there.
ahead.
You know, and clients are like, hey, you know what? Thanks for keeping us informed. Okay, which are 2 or 3 paragraphs every week. It's just an overview. What happened to the markets? What happened to the economy? Why did it happen?
That's great.
I try
That's
to
great.
make it so that it's not too technical, so that somebody who's very technical understands it and it's not too boring, but somebody who's not technical can still understand.
Yeah, that's great.
And so the interesting part is I asked my son, hey, did you happen to read? And he sort of shamelessly said, no, I haven't. I didn't, because there was a point that I wanted to make, and I wrote about it a couple weeks earlier. And he said, well, I read it religiously when the markets are doing poorly. But when things are going good, I don't look at it. And so the same thing goes with when things are doing poorly, I could tell people are reading it because I get so many thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And when things are doing poorly, you hear other advisors, the phones are ringing.
Yeah.
Our phones aren't ringing off the hooks, except for the same 2 or 3 people. We can always rely on them
Yeah.
to call.
Yeah.
And
But that's the whole sense of impending loss, that people have a kind of a brain signal like, uh-oh, I'm getting out of the safety zone when things are down.
right.
And that brings up the fear, and then the fear can take many, many different forms.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's really fascinating working with different people, and they all have different money experience, money stories, because I have some clients who look at their account, they literally call it, they're not vastly wealthy people, they're like, this is my fun money. It can go up and it can go down, but it won't matter until I take it out, and I know I have someone watching it so that I don't have to pay too much attention. Whereas other people, no risk. Absolutely not. I cannot stomach an up and down. It's fascinating how you ask them about how that happened and said, it's usually one thing or another. This is what worked for my parents, or I got burned,
Yeah.
and I'm not going back to that.
You see that a lot. One of the things that I have found is when it comes to risk, 2 things I can generally predict. Someone who is unsophisticated or unknowledgeable, doesn't sophistication, just not knowledgeable.
Yeah.
They're almost always very conservative because they fear losing all their money. It's that simple. The other thing I found is just working with a whole different areas of society is folks who work for a union, whether it be the government, teachers, union workers, are generally very conservative investors.
Oh, that's interesting.
But the other one that is even more interesting than all is, who also is very conservative? Business owners.
Yeah.
And business owners are the ones you'd say, they're going to be the ones who are risky, but I've learned I've learned that they look at their risk in the business and that the rest of it is, I want to keep that safe.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting. What have you found?
Well, what I'm thinking about, what was I? I wanted to tell you this. One cohort that I'm very concerned about are the ones coming up now that are 18, 25, the after the millennials, the Z,
Yeah.
and
Gen Z.
Gen Z. And you, I'm sure, have heard of Robin Hood, but I heard
Yes.
one interview that was really shocking. And Robin Hood is a platform for investing, but it's made like a computer game.
Yes.
So, you invest in a stock and yay, 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 yay,
Right,
yay.
fire.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, they had to ban that. Yeah.
Oh, really?
The SEC came down.
But
Oh, all right, good.
this interviewer was interviewing this young Gen Z person and said, because they came in very, very upset because their holdings had gone down. And in talking to this young woman, the guy said, well, didn't you know that stocks can go down? And she said, no.
Yeah.
No. She just thought this is a way of buying, and it would just keep going up and up and up, and I kept getting likes and claps and, yeah.
Participation trophy when it went down? Did she get a participation trophy?
You should have been there to suggest that. Oh.
I've heard people say that with their credit cards. I didn't know you had to pay those back.
I had one person who would get a credit card bill, and she'd kind of go like this, like you're
Yeah.
squinting,
Yeah.
and her eyes would only go to the minimum payment, and then she'd pay that, and she said, "Whew, that's all taken care of."
Yeah, I know, right? Also, when my kids were real young, if you needed money, just go to the ATM thing. You just stick a card in and you get money out.
Yeah,
Gives you free
there
money.
go.
That's right. That's a cool thing. By the way, on that topic, we're going to have to go on break. So, have you ever noticed that when you get those fresh, crispy bills, they're all stuck together? And you're always afraid of giving somebody a 20. Why don't the ATMs, why doesn't they stick together and it gives me more? Why don't they stick together? Why don't they stick together when they're coming to me? All right, on that note, we're going to take a short break. We'll be back with you in just a few moments.
Do you keep up regularly with your investments? Where exactly are your hard-earned dollars going? Are you financially prepared for an emergency?
I'm Mike Meninger, founder of Meninger & Associates Financial Planning. We believe that education and knowledge are powerful, and we want our clients to understand why we are making the recommendations that we make. It's your money, and you deserve to know where it's going, because it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. So call us today to discuss your financial concerns. Welcome back to Financial Planning Explained, and we're wrapping up the segment with Dr. Maggie Baker and talking about all this really super cool behavioral finance stuff. I know when you were with the financial resilience issue, why do I get stuck on that? You referenced ADHD has an impact on decision making. Can you elaborate on that?
Right. Well, the main point I want to make about that is that people with ADHD tend to be very impulsive. And what I mean by impulsive is whatever situation they're in the present becomes their whole world. So if somebody is telling them, oh, buy this stock, it's great, they'll go out and do it. They don't have an editor inside to check because they like the excitement of doing that. And then they might pull back and say, oh my God, what did I do?
Buyer's remorse, yeah.
But that comes way later, if at all. And that's the vulnerability for ADHD, because impulsivity is very, very hard to contain. And
But
if
that
it's
also goes-
biologically wired, it's even harder.
But that goes to spending as well.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Because
oh yeah.
you think about impulse, if you're buying a stock by impulse, I consider that better than just going to buy something that you don't need, because at least the stock you can resell and get your money back.
Right.
hopefully.
You don't even think, you go walk into a store, oh, there's a shiny new object. I want that.
That's
I'm gonna
right.
Get it. And that's it.
To add to all my other shiny
Yeah,
new objects.
Right. That
So
still have the price
how do you
tag
correct
on.
that? Or you just control it? Or just be aware of it?
It's very, very difficult to control. And it's only through hard knocks that it gets minimized.
Yeah.
Meaning that people get into debt that way, and they can get into serious debt. And then the serious debt gets overwhelming, and then they crash. And hopefully, it's kind of like an addict. Once they crash, then they'll listen. But without the crash, they won't.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. So you had also brought up.
Yeah, and before we move on from that, is one of the things that when you're working with a client who has ADHD, is one of the things that could be beneficial limiting the amount of decisions they have to make? Because we all have to make countless decisions in a given day, consciously or subconsciously. So one of the ways that, hey, do you want to invest in this stock? That's another decision to make. Is automating your financial life a potential solution to people with ADHD? Because rather than how much can I afford to invest this month and making that decision on the monthly basis, it's set in stone, it's automatic, and it's in the rear view.
That's a great idea, not only for ADHD people, but for everybody.
Well, that's right. That vastly helped me.
But the one thing I would say about that is that ADHD people hate to be told what to do. And if a normal person doesn't like to be told what to do, multiply that by 10. Mm-hmm. And that's how much. And the problem is that and what often happens is an ADHD person marries a non-ADHD person, and the non-ADHD person gets very fed up with this kind of behavior and can make the ADHD person feel bad, which then gives them license to be defiant. And the one thing you don't want to do is to make an ADHD person defiant, because if you think they could spend money when they're not defiant, you can see how they spend money when they are.
Yeah, that's not good.
So, and that's a good example of the kind of couple that I see, where, and I refer to it as kind of the driven and the dropped, because the person who's not ADHD's needs usually kind of go into the background because the amount of oxygen that the ADHD person absorbs is huge.
Right.
So because they're always almost, kind of falling out of line. And that creates a dynamic that I work with a lot with couples.
Interesting.
Yeah, and from a slightly separate angle, now every person's different. There's no really right, wrong way to do anything. So do you work with couples or spouses that manage their finances completely separate of one another? And what is that experience like?
Well, read my book. That's another little issue my late husband and I had.
Yeah.
Because he was just, he grew up in a very, very stable, his father was a doctor and they had plenty of money and he never worried about it and they never talked about it. So it was a non-issue for him, so he thought. And what happened was that he was very much a rescuer like you, Mike, and he would sometimes forget to send bills out for weeks. And I got really sick of that. So I suggested that we separate our money because I didn't run my business that way, and I didn't want to be associated with that kind of behavior. And he hated that idea and was angry at me for months, and until I convinced him that if we separated them, then I didn't care what he did with his money, and he shouldn't care what I do with my money. And then you won't complain about me, and I won't complain about you. And that's essentially what happened. It made it a lot better. So now my current boyfriend keeps his money separate, I keep mine separate, and even though we're essentially partners without being married, I would never blend my money with his because I like it.
I could see that later in life in the situation that you're currently at, and I could see the advantages and disadvantages to both. And I do know clients who keep their money separate, and they got a great happy marriage, but they also married late in life.
Oh, that's interesting.
Mid-30s, when I say late in life, mid-30s, because they have kids. Because that's the way they did when they first got together.
Yeah.
When you get together at a younger age, and I suppose, too, if you have two very independent individuals, it's easier to see them do that.
Yeah.
I have a couple of clients who they're two entrepreneurs who they have a wonderful relationship. They're just very competitive, and they love comparing. Their net.
How much they got
It's like, how much did you make this month? Well, I made.
That's fine.
That'll keep them going for a long time.
That's exactly it, right? So that's why there's no right, wrong way to do it. It's just whatever works. Now, my last question on that would be, how does that change when you're going to, say, fund a goal, right? Or make a large financial decision, such as purchasing a house, maybe funding a child's education. When you are managing your money separately, is it, and of course everyone's going to be different, but say, you're making more than your spouse, and that's something you have to work through as a couple.
Yeah.
Do you go 50-50 on it? Is it, I'll have a proportionate part of my income, right? That's something that I'd imagine you'd have to work through as a couple before you can.
Case by case.
Yeah, of course.
But that brings to mind my nephew whose partner is a kindergarten teacher, and he's in finance. And the discrepancy is huge. Mm-hmm. But they, like most couples don't do, they talked all about this before they got together. Mm-hmm. And they used me as kind of a sounding board for it. And it was really impressive. It almost kept them apart because the difference was so great, but they found a way to make it fair and make Jake, the kindergarten teacher, feel okay about himself, even though he wasn't making that much money, because he took on other functions that my nephew didn't have time to do, and he was great at it. And he's a good singer, he's a good photographer, he loved to research topics, so he would do all the kind of back office stuff, and it worked. But it only worked because they talked it out before they got into it.
Right.
And I imagine. Oh, I'm sorry. Good.
Yeah, it's interesting because one of my 30-second ads in BNI is for couples that are about ready to get married who are under the thrall of love, because they will not talk about money, but they need to.
Yeah.
And I have yet to have anybody step into my office in response to my ad.
Yeah.
They should. I think
They
you know,
absolutely
it
should.
should be premarital counseling, should be financial counseling as well.
Yeah, well, the,
I
the
agree with
Catholic
that.
Church does some of that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I know they have
Yeah.
the counseling. I didn't know they
Yeah.
had the financial
Yeah.
counseling.
I think that some of the wiser ones do.
They should.
Yeah.
And as our society moves into, more often than not, both members of a couple are working now. Whereas a generation ago, it wasn't quite the case,
No.
right? So I'd imagine that sort of discrepancy in income could come up more often.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, take a moment if you could, please, because this has been terrific, Dr. Maggie. We've learned a lot. It's been just an eye-opening 3 episodes.
And I've learned a lot.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Well, good. Take a moment and promote your book again, if you could.
Okay. I would encourage everybody, before they even thought about going to financial therapy, because that is a big leap for most people, read the book, because you might find your own awareness and answers from just reading the book. And if you don't, then come see me. But if you do, congratulations.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for joining us for what turned out to be 3 episodes with Dr. Maggie Baker. It's been absolutely fantastic. It's certainly a subject that Kyle and I are both very interested in, is the behavioral finance, and just the whole psychology of things is absolutely, it's fascinating, but it's also important to understand and know to be successful as a financial planner. It's not being successful for ourselves. It's being successful in guiding and assisting and advising our clients, is to understand the emotional behavior and everything else in the psychology that goes behind it. So I hope you had a good time, and thank you for joining. We'll see you at the next episode.